Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Michelle Saeed, and in each episode, we explore the stories behind innovative businesses, the challenges they face, and the plans for growth. Today, we're thrilled to have Jasmine Martinez, the founder and chief compliance officer of Mindful Compliance, joining us with over 7 years of expertise in California with licensing support, regulatory compliance, and risk management, all grounded in a mindful approach to ethical and sustainable compliance. We'll dive into her entrepreneurial journey, really what's gotten her started with mindful compliance, and how she's navigating the complexities of the cannabis industry. So excited to learn more about, your vision for scaling the consultancy, Jasmine. I'm going to pass the mic over to you to get started, and welcome to Founders Future.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's Jasmine Martinez Brennan too, just to make sure we get all the names in there. And then we're Houston based but we serve everyone nationally. It's a big job. It's a heavy lift and it's not the most glamorous, but it's definitely what we love to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thanks for letting us know. I know, the listeners tuning in, they're probably going to search you up later on. So we're going to make sure that's all updated in the summary. No, I'm excited. This is going to be a really unique one. The cannabis compliance industry, now, there was a bit of a boom a few years ago, from what I understand. I have my
Yeah.
own family in this industry as well. Let's kick things off from the beginning. Like, what specific problem was it within the cannabis compliance landscape, perhaps around, the regulatory challenges, licensing, that actually inspired you to launch Mindful Compliance?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was at the time that I founded Mindful Compliance working at Texas Original. It's one of the three medical dispensing organizations out here in Texas. And it's the majority stakeholder, but the program itself is very unknown. There's very few patients on it. So I really noticed that there was a need for just education on the subject, even for the public. But with dispensing organizations, not even just in Texas, I noticed everywhere else, and not even just medical, on the adult use side, on the hemp side too. I really noticed that there was a need for more accessible like standardization and education on the topics where regulatory compliance actually come in. So it was really just noticing that, attorneys are expensive. 100%. And a lot of times they don't want to write SOPs. They don't want to have to do a walkthrough. These are attorneys that are, ready to litigate, ready to protect trademarks, everything else in between for sure. They want to make sure that everyone's operating correctly, but they don't always have the time either. So we wanted to be that bridge between where that gap laid, and we wanted to be able to fill that in for people and be really like accessible as far as like financials go, because we know that startups are expensive and not everyone has the funds to pay a lawyer for 1,000 hours worth of work up front for sure. Just wanted to make sure we offered something as an alternative, and not as an alternative, as a substitute or an add-on for sure, because we want to make sure they're still working with a general counsel. And we always have a list of recommended ones throughout the nation too, because they are the rock stars at the end of the day. They're the ones making sure that everyone's protected. We just want to make sure that their T's are crossed and their I's are dotted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even beyond that, the attorneys probably don't have enough of that knowledge on some of the FDA regulations and compliance around, really starting in retail in cannabis, manufacturing, the growth of it. You guys have more of that all-encompassing aspect of it with service offerings, I would assume. Now, I want to dive into that. Really, let's get into the details for some of the listeners tuning in. How does mindful compliance really generate revenue today? Tell us a little bit about, the core offerings, some of the services, within your business right now, and really how you structure it for your clients, and then also like your ideal client to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. So our core offerings are oftentimes like label reviews or making sure that we're doing gap analysis or audits to make sure that they're not just ready for inspection, but ready for anything. We want to make sure that the due diligence is there for whenever investors or any kind of venture capitalists that are involved or any other stakeholders are educated on what these operations are actually doing, and making sure that they have everything in order. You don't want a bag of receipts whenever an investor walks in. You want to make sure you have everything put together and that is presentable, not just to investors though, to the public. It comes down to consumer safety. So we also do a lot of analysis of COAs and making sure that we have good lab recommendations. And when we say recommendations too, we always have a list of much more than just a few. Like I said, we serve nationally, so we make sure that we're constantly having a list of every time we see a new cannabis lawyer or every time we see a new lab come up, we make sure that we vet them a bit, we look into them, and then we add them to the list. That way people always have an option. We want to make sure that options are available. It's making sure that if one thing doesn't work for someone, we are able to offer something else. And it's just making sure, yeah, that it's accessible. Like I said, it's a big lift whenever you're making a startup. So offerings really come down to making sure that they're tailored. We want to make sure that our clients are being served correctly, not overcharged for things that they don't need, but also addressing any issues that may be unique to their operations.
Wonderful. Yeah. So, from what it sounds like, really covering all end-to-end areas of, regulations and compliance. When it comes to someone who comes to the process and they're looking for, that expertise, what types of clients are usually coming in? What's usually their background? I've been always curious to hear a little bit more about, the types of people looking to get into the cannabis industry. Are they
Mhm.
looking to open up like a retail store, get into, the cultivation and manufacturing? Do they have like other businesses? Are these like serial entrepreneurs or like more, hey, just everyday people? I have some like cash that's disposable. I want to go into this business because I feel like I could grow it. What have you seen on your end typically?
Yeah, so it's a spectrum of people. Absolutely. People who've never touched the industry, never touched the plant. So the people who are legacy, which is, people who have been in the illicit market but have, paid their dues, really are trying to build a legacy at this point, not just from the legacy market, but building their own legal legacies at this point. And so it's anybody and everybody. Absolutely. It's people with money, people without money who are just trying to, bring their knowledge to a market that could use it and could actually absolutely grow from it. And so we're trying to enable people who, can bring that knowledge to people who are struggling to understand it, but have the income to be able to want to enter the market and be able to build a business within that. So being able to connect those kinds of people too is a big thing for us. Even if we don't work with them, we want to make sure we're always referring people over to each other. And yeah, our ideal client is anybody who is ready to get started. Roll out nationally is one of our favorite type is any kind of food and beverage. So any drinks or any kind of consumable products are really big for us for sure. We like to do those label reviews and really get down to the nitty gritty and see where you can go.
Yeah, I was just about to say because, label reviews seem to be like a very core offering within, mindful compliance that it just seems like a happy marriage when someone comes in, they have consumable products and they're looking to, seek that insight from you as to hey, what works. Now it seems like everything is very customized and it is
Mhm.
so having to spend some time one on one, with each individual that comes in and they're looking to really like create the blueprint. We've interviewed guests in the consulting industry. They run very similar offers, very customized tailorings, and they found it tough to scale without burning out or even like sacrificing the quality and maintaining that consistency. I'm curious, like, how have you thought about scaling, the offer right now at Mindful Compliance while still keeping it effective and manageable? If you can share with some of the listeners who are like dealing with that challenge themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really coming down for us to bringing in people who offer more expertise and can be trusted with our clients and our work. And we work, if you've seen our team too on our website, we have people who have that expertise. So we also offer like not just the market reviews to be able to see which products can access which markets and not just the label reviews, but we also do technical reviews, formulations, or like I said, the COAs to make sure that that data is correct and those formulations are compliant and really bringing in those people that we know we can trust. It's a magical thing whenever you have those people who are willing to grow with you and you can bring on when you need them and they're flexible too. And really for the growth factor to make sure that it's scalable because you don't want that feast and famine with consulting. That's what it really always zeroes out to. Once again, it's a roller coaster, but as far as building up and becoming more, like you said, oh, how did you describe it? Where you're actually bringing in more clients and revenue without having to go back and forth and back and forth. We really are focusing on our marketing because it takes time for sure. And so we're trying to make sure that we're putting things out there that are targeting those clients that we're able to service a lot quicker, prioritizing our calendars, making sure that we're delegating a lot more efficiently for sure. And then, of course, we're trying to build out assets that are going to be on a more template basis so that whenever there are some more standardized things, we're able to provide those a lot quicker. That way, the tailored services can be focused on a lot more separately than those that you can actually standardize.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's such a great way of thinking about the productization of really what you offer. And also, it creates like that enablement as well within your consumer on how to do it on your own, where sometimes
Yeah.
you're one person, you can't be in all the rooms at once. Now, with that kind of in mind, I'd love to learn about, your team and how it is today, because we're talking about it right now. Is it just yourself involved in, that initial discovery and like creating those blueprints and really customizing a lot of those tailorings, or do you have other team members in place that are also having those conversations and, they're involved in that process as well?
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely involve the team. So I am the main point of contact whenever we have clients coming in because I want to make sure that we're explaining everything, all of our offerings, because I've gotten all of that feedback from our team themselves. But the team's enabled to be able to, whenever they need to have a discussion, they're absolutely able to make those contacts. So they will discuss things with them, their expertise. If they have any interest in something else that we offer, they're able to communicate that correctly. And then we'll set up a meeting with them, that team member, me, and then, of course, that potential client to make sure that we're addressing all of their issues and concerns. And the team's also fully enabled to bring ideas to the table. We want to make sure that we're enabling them to grow as well. And we fully encourage our team to, if you want to build something and you just need help and you need a boost, absolutely reach out because we want to make sure that they're building up the community as well. It's a team effort for sure.
Love that. Yeah, no, absolutely. Getting your people involved, giving them that experience as well, and like having front facing conversations, which is one of those skills that in any professional vertical, it's looked at very advantageously. Now, I'd love to learn, building on that, the way in which you're acquiring some of your clientele right now. What channels have been effective in that sense? Has it been LinkedIn, your own personal network? I know you've had so much experience within the compliance space, or referrals, or maybe you're leveraging like some paid ads right now. What's been the most effective for landing clients within the cannabis space?
Oh, absolutely. It's been LinkedIn, especially with our target client. So it all depends on the target client for sure. If you're consulting with different brands, I would absolutely urge you to go to Instagram. Instagram is where all those marketing, advertisements are, and then the needs, you'll see them. It's so much more visual for sure. But when it comes to the compliance consulting, you really want to try and connect with like their lawyers or their chief of staff or someone, on the executive or C-suite level, because we want to make sure that we're coming from the top down a little bit more when it comes to that because it's a hard sell for sure. But definitely LinkedIn's been really good for us. Facebook has been here and there. It's mostly you want to make sure that you're enabling all of those channels to be able to create more legitimacy and credibility because you want to make sure you have a presence. You want to make sure the first time they see your name is not when you're trying to, sell them on some kind of service or product. You want to make sure you're building that relationship over time and it takes multiple touch points sometimes. And I've had people contact us like 6 months later to be able to start something because they want to make sure that they've, heard of us, talked to people who have heard of us, and referrals are another big one for sure. Other than LinkedIn, because those will be people who've usually followed us for a while and seen our advertisements or something, or even just our posts, engaging with other people too absolutely helps because you want to make sure that you're communicating and you're showing that you are an expert in this field or whatever field you're in. You want to make sure that they are seeing what your input is and it's not too general. You want to make sure that you use a little bit of jargon so that they're like, wow, they really know, that they're an expert. But yeah, referrals are another big one. So making sure you're partnering, even on just a referral partnership, something informal, because we do have both. We have formal and informal partnerships, but making sure that you're building up these relationships with people who can benefit you. So like us, we work with insurance companies, sometimes banks, payment processors, like I said, lawyers too. So whenever they can't serve a client or they don't have the time because this is their client and they just know that they're not going to be able to get it done, but they know that they can subcontract to us, they will, speak with the client and then we'll talk all together and yeah, just make sure that everyone gets taken care of.
Yeah, no, I love that. It sounds like you've diversified really the ways in which you're really getting in front of, your audience essentially, right? And really I want to clarify because it's more for the listeners. Now, LinkedIn is super tricky with the way it is. There's so much online, and we hear the term LinkedIn ads, thought leadership on LinkedIn. For you, what's been like the way in which, you've seen that success? Has it been like, the organic side of LinkedIn, or like running LinkedIn ads where you've been able to get a lot of that traction?
LinkedIn ads haven't been as productive as just, I hate using the word thought leadership too, because it makes it seem just so generic, but really I really think it's sharing expertise, like sharing that knowledge a bit, giving them a taste of what you can offer, and then them trusting your input a bit more because you don't just want to be a thought leader. You want to be an executor. You want to be an activist within your space to be able to build up that community so that when people aspire to work with you there and they reach that goal, they're ready to go. But yeah, I really think the posts, the organic side of everything, making those like connections and then messaging them, thanks for the connection. I'm glad to meet you. I'd love to set up a call. Those have been a lot more lucrative for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, sometimes what happens as well is, always find with LinkedIn and even just like with the sort of the organic approach where you're building like your content, you're, providing a lot of those value-based use cases. It's almost like a slower roll per se than like doing advertising. It can be sometimes like a challenge. What are you doing right now to, create more of that, increase the velocity from like that awareness in your consumer so they are a little bit more ready and they're more positioned about a problem they have or the fact that they need a service. What are some of those strategies and systems you're looking into making that client acquisition a lot more like faster but also reliable?
Yes. So it's funny because I've learned this lesson the hard way. It was a slow build up to this point. Absolutely. And it still takes time for sure because you have to set that time aside, especially when you are your own marketing team at the beginning, making sure that you're putting that content out there regularly too. You want to make sure that people are seeing your posts on their timeline every single time. And it's a difficult task because you're making sure it's during work hours or that it'll land on their page within the week and making sure that you're putting something that'll grab their attention at least to read the first paragraph. So making sure everything's in there. But other than that, it's just, yeah, it to prevent that slow roll, it's definitely making those connections that are reaching out because that'll expedite it a lot more. It's like actually reaching out. So making sure I do think that LinkedIn Premium is worth it because you can see who's going to your page and being a little more curious. And you make sure you're looking at those insights too on those posts to see what kind of, you know, viewers are looking at it. So how many employees they have, what kind of industry they're in, and making sure you're looking for those types of people too, reaching out to them, even if it's that cold connection, making sure you're messaging them, making sure in that message too, you're offering solutions to any kind of potential problems they may not have identified. So it's sometimes making sure too that you're not offending people when you're presenting their issues to them because it doesn't always come off as an issue to them. It's something that, especially with, and I'm sure lawyers have seen this, accountants have seen it, where it's not a problem until it's a problem. So making sure that you're not telling them that this is something that can't be solved and it's not something that's a criticism, it's more of a constructive discussion starter.
I know, absolutely. I love that. And that's something that's often overlooked is being able to be patient with that process and understanding that, your audience probably doesn't even know that they have that issue to begin with, or maybe they're just not at that stage yet. But lead nurturing and really just like still having them in your ecosystem to where they can still see, hey, maybe not now, later down the line, we'll be able to explore this, or maybe, it's not top of mind right now. So I love the fact that, you're approaching it in that matter and it seems to be the way in which you can build more of that predictability and really have things snowball as the more and more consistent you are about it every single day. Now, I want to learn about the approach to sales. If someone does come in on LinkedIn and they want to have a conversation, what are some of those strategies that have worked best to convert some of those leads into long-term clients, whether it is through some of the partnerships that you were talking about, the direct outreach that you're leveraging as well, or even, industry events? How are you handling some of the sales processes right now? And are you doing it on your own solo, or do you have a team in place that's also involved in some aspects of it?
Yeah, so I'm doing most of it solo. I do have my team that they'll provide those leads if we need to follow up, or if they see someone of interest, they'll bring that to our attention. And if someone's in the area too, we'll ask them to go to some kind of event. But as far as events and LinkedIn and everything, it's the follow up. It really comes down to that. And it's something that I've again learned the hard way. If you wait more than a day or two, it can you can lose that and it'll go cold and they might come back and you might start a discussion, but the you want to make sure that you're presenting consistency and you're presenting that you can be that person that they can rely on and respond quickly and make sure that you're serving them in the time frame that they need because a lot of times when they reach out for something like a service it's because they need it sooner than later and they are on a tight schedule and you want to make sure you're able to serve that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, following up like we were talking about, really nurturing anyone who comes through the process is super important. Now, in terms of really filtering through, your ICP, because sometimes what happens even with LinkedIn is I feel like everyone does and everything in the world. You look at a profile and you're like, oh yeah, they seem like a good fit. But then you start that outreach process, you have that conversation, you're like, maybe there's not like that alignment. Like, what are some of those ways in which you're, looking at consistently targeting like your right ICP, filtering through it, just don't from an organic lens? Because I know it's sometimes so difficult. And I know like our listeners tuning in, they're also maybe dealing with some of those challenges right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also identifying which stage you want to get them into. So for us, like the very initial startup, if they haven't had the funding to back it, or if they don't have partners that can help, invest in that acceleration, because you want to make sure too what their timeline is, not just the funding, but the timeline. So if they're rolling out for, they're planning ahead for a year and they don't have any even the initial seed funding, it does become a little more difficult because you want to be able to give them that time. But if they can't, if they're working a second job and they're, you can only talk to them at 6 or 7 p.m. and they're on a whole different timeline too, it's fine to have them return. It's one of those things you want to be, very upfront with them, very, I guess, not direct in a mean way, but definitely you want to be direct in making sure that where they need to be. You can even advise them on that part. Honestly, I do that all the time with people when we can't work together. I let them know, I need you to be at this stage and you can do this and this to get there. So it's definitely offering something still, just letting them know that you are, again, the expert in that field and that they can trust you and they can come back anytime. But just making sure that you can help them get to that point too. And if you have the time, making sure if you can and if you want to invest in that person, get in the beginning, offer maybe equity packages or something, but definitely just being able to, like you said, nurture that relationship and making sure that they come back whenever they're ready. Yeah, just identifying that stage. You want to make sure you're identifying the stage, where they are as far as any kind of funding, if that's going to be something that's going to hold it up a bit, not just with your services, but any other services that might come up. Because like with us, we want to make sure, are you able to order the packaging that you're going to be, designing right now? Because laws can change by the time you're ready to do that. So we want to make sure we're not just, taking the money and running after we're done. We want to make sure that we're also investing in your success so that once we're done with the consulting, if that contract ends, that you're not, a week out from the any new legislation that would affect the packaging and your target markets and everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, just making sure you're vetting also who the contact is that's reaching out. So if it's like a salesperson and you're not really working sales, what's the issue here? What's the discussion you want to enable from here? So whenever they reach out, just making sure you're vetting what those questions are. And if you can't serve them, refer them to someone, that's in your network that you'd really trust to be able to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. You're dropping some really great wisdom here. I mean, that in itself was powerful. You're providing so much value right now, to us on like really like the ways in which this has worked for you and like the power of referrals. I think when you put good in the world, it comes back to you. And so such an important thing in like our community of entrepreneurs is that if you can't serve them right away, yeah, absolutely refer them out. And you don't know later down the line that favor will be paid back to you in a lot of ways. So power of like really leveraging strategic partnerships, one of those acquisition channels a lot of people really don't look into, but building that network and that becomes your net worth ultimately. Now the growth sounds exciting from really what it is. Like you've developed a lot of ways in which you're doing outreach, acquisition, sales, having those conversations, leveraging a lot of your expertise. If you can share some of the bottlenecks that stand out, what would it be? Is it even attracting like the right leads that we were talking a little bit about more predictably, improving your conversions, or really like scaling delivery? Like, what's top of mind to keep all of this momentum going as you start to scale into 2025?
Yeah, so we've actually, before even this week, we've had a little bit of a bottleneck just because you have to think of those outside factors that affect your services as a consultant. So for us, legislative sessions have been going on in nearly every state. Now they're winding down, but it has been a challenge trying to make sure that we're still able to serve clients that we had and making sure that we're trying to acquire clients, even if not now, for after sessions. So making sure we're educating them and still using that time. So you want to make sure that the time delegation for yourself, your company, your staff, that it's all being used wisely. So in the meantime, what we have been doing is just making sure we're building those assets, offerings, something more affordable too for clients who can't yet work with us, but maybe we can give them some kind of template so that they can get to that point too. So making sure that you're putting some kind of, like you said, like a not just an asset, but something that can really enable them for growth. That way, once they're ready to move with you, even if you're working with a referral on something else that gets them to that point, then they can hop over and start working and getting to the next level for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's product led growth, right? And that's from what
Mhm.
like is the approach is like, how do you, serve the masses in a way where you can still offer them those use cases up front, get them into that ecosystem like we were talking about, and then later down the line focus more on that customization. So love the fact, and I know in the compliance industry especially, there's so many different regulatory challenges and changes, so even navigating that in our current climate, I can imagine it's a little bit difficult now. I really like to find out more about, what's top of mind for, the future, like growing mindful compliance over the next 6 to 12 months. How are, focused on those goals? What does that look like? Entering new markets, expanding services. I know, the templates being one. What does that look like for you this year?
Yeah, so we're trying to make sure that as far as those templates, we're creating these documents and these enablements that'll have these referrals that are able to go public, because some of our referrals are a little more private for clients that need specific needs, and we don't want to put anything out there that would, I guess, give an opinion to someone in a negative way, because there is still a stigma with cannabis for sure, but definitely making sure that we offer something that's a little affordable, really going to help someone, not just be something that they might or might not use. We want it to offer a value that's going to directly create not just revenue, but growth and sustainable growth at that point too. So as far as templates, that's one thing. We want to make sure that we're educating as well. So we're offering some stuff that we're not yet disclosing, but we're building up on. And then we really want to make sure too that we're standardizing some of our offers as well. So we're going to be creating some packages soon that will be really quick, something that we can delegate to our team members as well, that will be a little easier on our calendars, and also leave room for those clients that are trying to do like national rollouts. So as far as our growth too, we already service nationally, but it just depends on which client is where, and what they're trying to do. Just making sure that we're really tailoring that to them and making sure that they're, like I said, sustainable growth. Yeah.
100%. In an industry like yours as well, that is still absolutely necessary, even as, you standardize the offerings, right? Because, the laws are so different in each state. Right? And it goes back to what we were saying earlier. That's a lot. You're a superwoman, handling that and navigating through that. I love that. Now, how do you see the cannabis compliance industry evolving in the coming years, especially with like regulations shifting? How is mindful compliance like positioning itself for that type of future?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've partnered with other compliance consultants too, because you want to make sure not just that you know your competition, but you're able to work together, because sometimes these projects get really big. And so having multiple people that you can actually work with, not just your team members, but where you're able to work with other firms who might have, different connections with other expertise, or even not just on the consulting for compliance side, but also strategic, partners. We do have some partners that are coming up too that, like I said, they work banking and insurance, but strategic development, business development, trying to make sure that they're not just working on the marketing side, but also when's the phase of this rollout, and really communicating with those teams as well, internal and the other consultants too. But definitely, it's a challenge sometimes. It gets to the point where you want to make sure that you're communicating with everyone and staying and keeping your phone on for sure at all times, because the time zone differences can be a thing.
Yeah, for sure. Especially as you're serving all the markets, right? I can only imagine that at different times there's always going to be something that comes up. So many different changes happening, especially within the news. I like to ask everyone who is a guest. I want to get a bit hypothetical, because if you had unlimited resources, right? You have a genie, he pops up in the room with you, and you rub the lamp, and he gives you like all these wishes. What would you implement immediately to accelerate the growth of mindful compliance today if you had to?
I would absolutely invest in some of these build outs that we do have that are rolling a little slower. They, I think, will be pretty revolutionary when it comes to compliance. And I'm really excited for whenever they're done. But that's something I would absolutely invest in, is technology, because that's where everything's moving. Everything is always advancing. So you want to make sure that as far as consulting, you're streamlining your own like activities and movement, but also investing in what's going to be the next step, or what's the future of my niche within an industry. So for us, yeah, absolutely. Other than the technology part, it would be investing in marketing for sure. It's a heavy lift when you're having to go on Canva and make a few things here and there, because you're having to make the time for it. It's an extra 30 minutes here and there, and it adds up. So that'd be another big rollout for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Any ways that you could streamline, get the right marketing experts even in the room to like offer perspective on how you can make this a lot more automated and efficient. Time is money, like they say. You can always get more of that back. Now, for the entrepreneurs that are listening, what's like the best piece of advice you've received about scaling a compliance consultancy, perhaps from like your years and your observations in the cannabis industry? What would you say to them, those that are just starting out?
I would say be kind to yourself because there are mistakes that you make along the way. There's time that you feel you wasted on something that wasn't as productive as something else that you could have done. And just learning from those lessons, you want to make sure that you're continuing to move forward because there will always be another chance, another client. It hurts in the moment whenever those lessons happen, but it's just learning from them, making sure you're moving forward, communicating better, just teaching yourself, but being kind because if you beat yourself up, that's even more or even less productive for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And slow and steady wins the race, right?
Yes.
The philosophy that's worked for you and you've been acting on it, and that's what works. Oftentimes, it's so easy to get caught up in like the glamorization of entrepreneurship, which is like the
Yeah.
being a millionaire overnight. And it's absolutely not the case. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes, and setting the right foundation is important. I think really looking forward to seeing, the way in which you standardize your offerings and, really become a visionary within the cannabis compliance space.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, on that note, that wraps up another inspiring episode of Founders Future. Jasmine, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights into, such a unique world and not talked about often. I think this is the first time we've interviewed someone from the cannabis space. There's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of nuances, but you're such an empowered individual and leader and woman boss. I'm excited to see where this goes. So,
I appreciate it.
yeah, and to our listeners, if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe to Founders Future wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can also find some more resources and insights at closers.io, where we help businesses scale through trained appointment setters and world-class sales systems. If you would like to get in touch with Jasmine, feel free to go to her LinkedIn below. In the summary, we're going to post that. And if you would like to find out more about, the strategy on how to scale, within the cannabis space, she is the go-to expert. Please hit her up. And until next time, we will keep pushing forward and see you all on the next one.